So, helping tourists remember the role of the traveling salesman to meet a demand for souvenirs. Souvenir. Souvenir is a French word. It means to remember, a thing that is kept as a reminder of a person, place, event, or thing. Souvenirs really came on in the 18th century. So use increased after the 1700s. The first ceramic souvenir that we know of in the books I have studied points to the 18th century, and there was a ceramic piece that has on it memory of. And so it was the beginning of using ceramics as souvenirs. A passion for collecting. Most Shelley collectors are passionate about one type of ware. We collect many types, but one thing typically gets us all excited. For some, it is Queen Anne cups. For others, it is signed Walter Slater pieces. We all have one thing that gets us really excited and really becomes a priority when we're out hunting things. I noticed early on that the UK, there were very little souvenir ware pieces that were made with views. Most of the things in the UK were crest pieces. As I've said before, for me, what got me really excited was souvenir pieces made with views, particularly of North America, where I live. One of the first pieces I came across was this piece. This piece, I thought for years, was from Scotland, because all it says is Lover's Lane, Kincardine. On the other side, it says Shelley. And so Kincardine, of course, Scotland. Turns out it's not Scotland. Turns out it's just actually right across the lake from where I live in Ontario, Canada. There's a town called Kincardine. Shelley Company actually made 4 views of the town of Kincardine. It would have been for sale around the turn of the century. This particular one, Lover's Lane, is very interesting in that Irene and I eventually go to Kincardine, and Irene discovers that Lover's Lane still exists in Kincardine, Ontario. So the souvenir piece would still be applicable today. But that got me to hunting more and more things. So initially, many of the things I found were Canadian. So there's all sorts of things from Toronto, such as this church piece from Toronto. There are other pieces from Quebec and from British Columbia. Also another one from Toronto, which is the Armories. Many of them are black and white. There are some that are colored. Particularly the American ones tend to be black and white. Of course, I began to search, and the more I searched, the more I found, such as this one from Boston. So there was a concentration showing up of the New England area as I bought more and more pieces. By the way, I have quite a few of these. Another one was Quincy, Mass. This is the home of John Adams, who became president, as did his son. Again, these are Shelley and Wileman pieces. A lot of people went to Shelley for fundraisers. This is a church in New Canaan, Connecticut. And so these things will be made to help raise money for the church or something. And then this, again, is a tourist spot. This is Old Button Ball, which still is a tourist spot today, Plainfield, Massachusetts. Again, New England. There's a lot of Shelley souvenir pieces made for the New England area. Here's another one from a church in Dublin, New Hampshire. So as things went on, we actually, Irene and I took our honeymoon in Provence, which is Cape Cod. So we were lucky enough to have a wonderful honeymoon back in '97. And incredibly, in the antique shop at Provincetown was this little piece. The piece was made for the Mayflower. For historians know that the Mayflower didn't land at Plymouth Rock. It actually landed across the harbor at the point of Cape Cod. And after a few weeks, they actually left and went over and landed at Plymouth Rock, and that's all famous history now. This piece was apparently made around the turn of the century again, and is probably a giveaway by the newspaper in Provincetown. So again, we're lucky enough to find this and get this piece. Here's another one that's made for the American market. This is the map series. There's I think 2 show the United States, the others show Europe. But again, they're trying to make something that they will sell for the American market. course, we all know the 1893 that Percy came to the Columbian Exposition. This is a bone dish. I also have another bone dish like this, which reflected one of the images. Here's more exhibition pieces. I have quite a few of these on the mantle behind me today. I picked up a lot over the years. What really got me excited was this piece. I found this piece in Cleveland at an antique mall. It was actually just in a stack of dishes. And this is Snoqualmie Falls, which is in Seattle, Washington. So it was different because I've never really seen anything like this. And again, it was just sitting, whoever had it for sale just thought it was, junk, just in a stack of old plates. But for somebody like me who wants to collect these souvenir pieces, these views, this was really quite a find. I found a sister plate to it later. This is Mount Rainier, which is outside of Seattle. It actually has the wrong height on the plate because since that time, the method to measure mountains has changed. But this is a piece, both were made for the Cowley gift store in Seattle, Washington. Again, I've continued to find great things like this one. This is from South Haven. Used to people from Chicago would catch a ship, come over to South Haven, Michigan for vacation. So this is the ship bringing the people in. And on the saucer, it has the resort, which is Cold Springs. So this would have been a piece you would have picked up to remember your wonderful trip to South Haven, Michigan. I was lucky enough to find this. This is actually at Hotel del Coronado in San Diego, California. This is the town I was born in. About 50 years after this plate was made, I was born in San Diego. What's unique about this plate is that when this hotel was new in 1890s, it was a long way from San Diego. You actually had to take a ship, a ferry across the harbor, had to take a wagon, and eventually get out to this hotel, which today is 5 minutes from San Diego. But the hotel's still there, it's still open, so pretty cool thing. This is interesting pieces. I've actually found a few of these more recently. This is South Dakota, and it's actually Lead, South Dakota. People from South Dakota hate it when people say lead, but at Lead, South Dakota, this was a gold mine area, and so they made this and several other pieces that I have that are actually from South Dakota. And so how did that happen? Nearby in Lead is this hot springs, which is the hot baths. Out west, there's a lot of hot baths throughout the Rocky Mountain region. And so this is the hot springs. You got to keep looking. I just found these pieces. This is in the State of Michigan collection. So the state of Michigan has a collection of View souvenir pieces. They're housed up at the Manoogian collection on Mackinac Island. When I came across these, I was really shocked that they were in this. The books and actually say that this is German views, German Austrian views, because there's so little English viewware that it's kind of just a drop in the overall production. But these are legit. This is a Wileman piece made for the Davis store on Mackinac Island, and then there's the biscuit barrel next to it. Both of them, if they ever decide to get rid of this, I'll be the first one wanting to buy it. So back up to subject, helping tourists remember. Did Shelley contact potential customers directly with their own sales force, or did Shelley depend upon being contacted by potential customers? I did a lot of research into traveling salespeople. This gentleman is a medieval salesman. So peddlers actually goes back to medieval times when they would travel around selling, wine or other things that were hard to get. And it was a way of making a living. Peddlers, drummers always had to be resourceful. They would have packs and carry boxes. They would carry pack things, and they would go from town to town. They'd use wagons. They could, however they could get trains to get around the world. Traveling salesmen came in all sizes and shapes. This is a picture from turn of the century. Everyone remembers a traveling salesman coming to town because they often had a lot to say. They were colorful, they traveled a lot, they had stories, jokes, things to tell, and things to see. So why did souvenir China take off? The Industrial Revolution brought many changes and new wealth. In the United States, there was this act called the McKinley Tariff Act the purpose of the act was to raise the prices of imports to help encourage domestic production. What it actually did was cause domestic producers to raise all their prices. So that's but the McKinley Tariff Act had another effect we'll get to. Dry plate photography was a big deal for souvenir pieces. Also Germany and Austria, which is the area that Meissen is found in, Dresden. They became a very big player in souvenir ware. How to supply, the issue for the producers, for the salespeople, was how to supply this increased demand, which became very huge very quickly. The McKinley Tariff Act had one big effect that affected souvenir and viewware. It was that it required the country of origin to be put on the wares. So this meant you had to have an extra step. So clever salespeople discovered that what they could also add on to it was the vendor's name. So we see starting in the 1890s that the vendors start to show up. And so it's why you see this, because it'll have made in Austria, it'll have the who's buying the piece with the store's name. And we see these stores actually scattered all over the world getting these, making these purchases. Another big technical change was dry plate photography. Now, wet plate photography, there's also several kinds of photography. But dry plate, what that allowed the industry to do was to ship a photograph around the world. So you could make a photo of something and then ship the dry plate all the way over to England and to Austria and Germany and have a plate made to allow it to be printed onto tissue paper. The other trend that took off was for the souvenir pieces was look where I have been. People would buy special cabinets to have in their entryway and in their parlors that would be able to stack these pieces onto the cabinet, and they would say, look where we've been. We've been to all these places. Isn't that grand? And this is really the expansion of View China. There is such a thing as Souvenir China salespeople. This is a Souvenir China sales force in 1908. This is a photograph of the guys that traveled around Middle America selling souvenir pieces. That was their job. I was lucky enough to spend time with a traveling salesman when I was young. This is a man named Western Grizzard. He passed away in the early 80s, but he was a fascinating guy, did a lot of stuff. One of the stories he told me was when he was traveling salesman selling radios. So he was in a Model T. He stopped to sleep. So he rolls out his bed underneath the car. And pretty soon he's awoken by a guy with a shotgun. And the guy with the shotgun, asks him, what are you doing here? And, I'm trying to sleep. And so he can't sleep here. This is our mine. And so then he says, what are you doing? Western starts to talk. And sales guys were always talkers. They loved gab. They'd had stories. So Western began to talk about what he did. And what Western did was he sold radios. Now, at that time, which is the early 20s, a radio was battery operated. So the fellow says, my ma has never heard one of them. Will you bring it to the house? So Western's, happy with his luck. So he said, sure, okay. So he takes his radio to this house in the woods, and this house has no water, no electricity. It's out in rural Tennessee. He hooks up his radio, hooks up his batteries, and Western said, lucky for Western, the radio worked. And a show came on, and they were very impressed and let him sleep the night there at that farm. But that's what a traveling salesman would do. He basically would make friends, make relationships, and then rely on those relationships both as a place to stay and connections as to selling the wares. So in the study of View China, there's really 3 books that have been written on it so far. Books are Ian Henderson, Stank Stefano, Lawrence Williams. Who are they? In the 1960s, a serious study of View Souvenir China began. First work was identified in the UK, actually, by Ian. These gentlemen continue to do research. Specific focuses on what View China or German View China is. English view China as a small part of this overall discipline, but when you go and look at stuff, you'll see that most of the views are actually Austrian and German. We're going to look at the biggest players in View China in North America, but there were actually dozens. Souvenir or View Ware comes in three types: historical Staffordshire dinner plates with scenes, souvenir plates not intended for dinner use, and then Souvenir China, View China, or the German View China. Staffordshire is like this plate. This is a 1930 Jackson Warranted plate by Job and John Jackson of Burslem. The scene on it is Hartford, Connecticut. So these scenes actually date back quite a long time and were very successful commercially. This is a 1912 plate by John Roth, hand painted in Detroit, Michigan. This is a casino at Belle Isle. Type 3 is this type, which is the View Wares that Shelley made. So this is Cold Springs Resort. The biggest player in the View Souvenir Ware business was Benjamin Franklin Hunt Jr. and Sons. He was a second-generation businessman. He really built the business up tremendously. This store you see here in this picture is actually all souvenir ware, because that's what all they sold was souvenir pieces. And they sold them throughout New England. They were this is Boston-based, so they sold all through the New England area, and they became very, very big by the 1890s and into late 1890s. This is an example of BFHS. On the bottom, you see it's made in Austria. He actually became successful enough. He built his own factories over in Germany and Austria and made things. More examples of the BFHS. And again, more BFHS. The next company that come along that became quite big was Wheelock. They were in the Midwest, so they were Wisconsin, Indiana, Chicago, and they became very big. They had multiple stores. Here's a card of the 1899. This is the billhead of Wheelock. Now, again, this is souvenir stuff. All they're selling is souvenir. They're not even, Wheelock did venture out in some other products, but became very big so because they would not just sell at their stores, they would sell to other stores as well. Here's examples of Wheelock, which still can be found in antique shops all over the world. The BFHS combined with Wheelock, who then was taken over by John Roth. So as in many industries, as things begin to shift, BFHS quit actually making under their name in 1902. They combined with Wheelock, and Wheelock was very aggressive in inventing the traveling Salesforce methodology so they could get product to market. They actually expanded their sales force all the way up to 31 people in the field. John Roth, who was one of the salespeople for Wheelock, eventually takes over. And John Roth actually stayed in the business right up into the 1960s. So he actually continued to sell this stuff for a very long time. John Roth did not limit himself to Germany and Austria. He also used England. So he would go, as other people did, to England vendors. Another man became significant, which is in the Rocky Mountains. This is HHT, Henry Tamman. And his products also then swept up through. This is where the South Dakota pieces would come from. So you'll notice that all these various vendors, what they're doing is this is where the souvenir pieces got made because they had people on the ground that could make the contacts. They also use non-Weilman pieces. So you'll find a piece like this, which kind of looks like a Weilman, but it's not. It's made by somebody else. Another one, this is a Royal Winton. So everybody got into the game. Everybody was making, if they could make some money on selling their pieces off. And of course, Weilman did not mark all their pieces. So I have plates behind me. And one of the things with Weilman pieces, they'll actually often mark with their registration marks. So you can tell it's a Shelley piece, not because it has a stamp, but because it's registered. So my question that I've been looking to answer was, how did Weilman push products into America? Well, they didn't. What they did was America pulled. With these sales organizations, they were able to contact the Foley, Weilman China, and ask and get contacts that would allow them to go ahead and get these pieces made that we now have. So as further evidence, I saw a report in England when I was there a few weeks ago from Chris Davenport. This report was by Alan Shelley. The report was about how good exports were. Most went through agents, except for Bermuda, which did have direct contact with Shelley Company. This would indicate that Shelley also used these existing trade routes and marketing methodologies. This would explain the distribution of the wares made as they match up with the distributors we talked about earlier. I'd like to thank many of the people in this club that have helped with this subject over the years. Peter Perazzo, Greg Sullivan, Ruth Friedman, John Barter, Owen Dudgeon, Chris Davenport, David Cox, and many others. And the research continues. These are my references, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Marcus.
Stop sharing, and everybody comes back. So, thank you. And I called my hair special.
See, you're supposed to notice his traveling salesman outfit.
Right. Yeah, would you hand me a piece? See, would you buy a piece of china from this man? I'll make you a deal.
I bet you would.
It's a good.
Do you have any questions for Marcus? Don't be bashful. Oh, here we go, Lee.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I have this cup and saucer that's Mark Shelley, and I think it's a souvenir piece from Blackpool, England. Am I right? Did they make colorful cups and saucers? Yeah.
Yes.
I looked up Blackpool, and it was this tower was built in 1894, and when it opened, it was the tallest man-made structure in the British Empire at 518 feet, and it was 158 meters tall. So that gives you an idea of how tall it was. And they say that it was to kind of rival the Eiffel Tower at the time. So I thought that was kind of neat. I did not get to see it when I was in England, but maybe on another visit.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's viewware, and the viewware business in Germany and Austria. When I said it was big, I mean, imagine the Shelley, there's hundreds of potters. So in Dresden, for example, it's like 200 different companies could make the copper plates for transfers. So they had a lot of efficiency over there to do things. And even Shelley would send work over to Germany and Austria for transfers and plates to get made, because they had that ability to make all that stuff.
Interesting.
So what happened with the business is that viewware picks up in the early 1900s with Staffordshire and stuff, and so it's a thing that people know that they can do. What actually drives the end of viewware, which is up to the 1920s, is postcards. So one of the technical changes that happened was the it's the Chicago exhibition, again, the Columbian exhibition, 1893, the postcard is introduced there in the United States. It had already been legalized in England, and it started the postcard boom. So postcards went from a novelty in the 1890s to, giant. So people moved away from buying ceramic pieces and started buying postcards.
Sure. And one other interesting thing about it, it actually says here, souvenir from Blackpool, right on the side, on the other side of the picture. Yeah.
My newest Shelley souvenir piece I have is actually from England, and it's a dated 1960 piece from the city of Stoke-on-Trent. So, they made stuff as long as it would sell. I mean, that's
Thank you. That was real interesting. Thank you.
David?
Yeah, really, really interesting, Marcus. I'm really interested in how Wileman, as it were, got the contracts for all this kind of work. Somewhere at the back of my mind is didn't Wileman have an agent in New York, or was it just Shelley who had an agent, and would therefore requests for souvenir ware have gone through that agent, and then subsequently stuff would have gone across the Atlantic? to the UK for manufacture, or am I wrong on that, frankly?
I would suspect that there's an agent. I don't know who that would be. I don't know how to go about starting to look for that agent. But it would be, I mean, I've worked in industry my whole life, and I know you need agents on the ground. You can't be a world supplier of stuff without some feet on the ground. There's almost all countries have barriers to entry, and you need somebody on the ground that's going to help you get around that sort of stuff.
I'm just fascinated with this idea of the actual material, the photos or whatever they might be, crossing the Atlantic one way,
right,
but then being transferred either in Germany or Austria, or in our case, in Stoke, and then being shipped the whole way back to the States again, and then being distributed right over to the West Coast in places.
Yeah, and then even more incredible, often the box that the stuff was shipped in would be shipped all the way back to Stoke. So you'd get your china in a barrel full of straw. When you took all the china out, the straw you took out wouldn't fit back in the barrel. You then had the barrel was to be returned back to Stoke to be used over again. So yeah, it was crazy.
So somewhere on eBay at some point, a barrel will come up, and there'll be a huge demand led by Chris Davenport, to buy this.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Jerry?
Marcus, did you research at all potteries in America? I mean, there must have been manufacturers there. It amazes me that they had to go all the way across the pond to get what appear to be fairly simple items.
They are simple. The caveat is the quality of the bisque. So one of the problems America has is that we make very good stoneware still today. So we're still making Homer Laughlin, designed by Reed, but it's stoneware. One of the problems we have in America is we don't have the quality of clays. So from what people wanted, particularly in this period from 1890, this is from my reading, that they didn't really want the American pieces, which there are American pieces on stoneware. In fact, Ohio made a lot of it. So Ohio was making view pieces and making all sorts of souvenir pieces. So if I've not had the time, I know some of the Ohio potters, they're down through these towns. They go all the way down to the Ohio River. But again, it wasn't the bone china. It wasn't the Dresden quality, and so that's one of the things that drove the demand, was that they wanted the higher quality ceramic bisqueware. That's what I've read. That's what I've read. So, but yeah, no, you're correct. There's a bunch of Ohio. I've got stuff scattered around my house from Ohio, because Ohio remains today a big maker of pottery.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's why the Reed brothers wound up in Ohio. Any more questions?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, I wondered, do you just collect Shelley and Wildman souvenir ware?
I just collect. To collect, my answer is yes. So
But you explore the others, but you just actually, okay. So Lee showed us a cup, a cup, and she, I thought I'd just show you this, which I bought as a present for somebody, and it's actually the Blackpool Tower with, what's that in the front, in the water in the storm?
Yeah.
It's a lifeboat.
Lifeboat.
Which reminded me of Linda's talk at the Shelley weekend, but it won't be with me for long because it's for somebody else. But I thought Lee might like to see it. Actually does say Blackpool underneath. A rough sea Blackpool.
Yeah, there's crests. I looked up the crest thing because I was always confused about Canada, and the crests go back in Canada to the 1700s. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of really oddball crests, and Shelley would make the crest. The facsimile on the Shelley piece is made specifically for Shelley, and it's, kind of unique. But the symbolism of the crests actually date back to the 18th century in Canada. So it was
Well,
one,
yeah, but they'll be tracing it back to the even earlier stuff in the medieval England from families that settled and things like that.
well, the Canadians are actually really pretty cool. I mean, for example, St. John's, New Brunswick, it's a pair of moose looking at each other. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. It's and
Yeah.
a bunch of Canadian pieces. Another great one is Salmon Run,
Oh
Alberta.
yeah.
So there's a place, Salmon
Yeah.
Run. So these places are all cool and unique. But they had the same problem in Canada. They didn't have a lot of crests, so they would have to make a view. And so Canada has a lot of really fun view pieces. Thousand Islands. It's got one that has a boat elevator. So it's a
Oh yeah.
a view piece made of this device that still exists, and it's a boat elevator. The boat goes in, the elevator goes up and down.
Yeah.
So it was very, very fun. So one thing I wanted to show you, Ruth,
Oh
was
yeah.
this is your incense burner.
Now being used for its proper purpose.
It's supposed to hold hat pins. So
That's great.
thank you for this piece.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. I was so pleased it went to someone it meant something to.
Don't put incense in it. No, don't do that.
Well, I had to get something in the Wildman snake.
Aye for incense. Any more questions?
Do we have any show and tell today? Oh, Carolyn. Unmute yourself, hon.
Oh, Dan Wilson came.
There we
Okay,
go.
thank you. Marcus, that was wonderful. I enjoyed it so much.
Thank you.
I used to have more souvenir pieces, but I only have one, and you showed it in your talk, but I thought I'd show it again. It's the little thing with John Adams and John Quincy Adams' birthplace.
Yep.
And the retail shop on the bottom is, let's see, I've got it written down here. It's C.F. Pettingill in Quincy, Massachusetts. And of course, Quincy is where the homes are located. I just wondered if you knew anything about that particular retailer, if you've seen it on other pieces at all.
No, I've not studied that retailer at all. I have studied John Quincy a lot, but not not the retailer that sold that. So
Right. Well,
okay, so question
thank
about
you.
John Quincy. But there's a lot of, it's interesting, all these vendors. It's like it's a store trying to, it's like my family had a business in Colorado when I was young. That's probably why I like souvenir pieces, because we sold souvenirs, we sold stuff. And it was fascinating, the whole economic proposition of getting junk and then putting it out, and people come and then they buy the stuff and then they come back next year. And how did that, it was pretty amazing how it all worked. So it's a
I have a piece.
Jeff?
Yeah, I've got a courthouse Winnipeg.
yes, Winnipeg, yes.
Yeah, I bought this about a couple of months ago on eBay, and I think it's about a couple of hundred black and white Canadian pieces. I know Robin's got quite a few, but yeah, this was a nice cup, I thought, of the courthouse.
Yeah, no, there's even and it's fun because there's one from Fort Williams, and one of the ones from Fort William, which is now called Thunder Bay. The image that's on the piece is where Neil Young and Stephen Stills met, because they're performing as teenagers for an entertainment. And so it was the Armory at Fort Williams. And as we all know, for rock and roll fans, that meeting created a lot of history for music fans, because Neil Young and Steve Stills. So these pieces, these little Shelley pieces that we have and grab up, when you look into it, they're fascinating histories of these things. There's prisons. There's a couple of prisons.
Yep, I've seen one of those. Yep.
Gary?
Yeah, Marcus, you mentioned about postcards. We've talked about the pattern books and things in the past, but the so-called scrapbook that Ray Reynolds had at home and is now part of the Shelley part of the archive in Stoke. And that's full of postcards and photographs that were sent by people that wanted things manufactured for Shelley to copy the picture from it. So they'd sent a picture of the local monument or town hall or something. And then Shelley would produce the product to ship back. So that's how so many of the designs were produced very simply, just based on a postcard. Chris knows a lot more about this than me, but that was certainly how the original designs were done for many of the products.
Fascinating. Yeah, no, it's someday I'll get a look at that book.
Indeed.
Hopefully. Of course, I couldn't see it.
Julie's got her hand up.
I'm sorry, who had a hand up?
Julie Stevenson.
Judy?
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Marcus, for your presentation. So I've got a little piece here. So I feel very lucky because I live in a cathedral city. I live in Peterborough, which is in the east of England, halfway up. And we've got a cathedral here. It's very beautiful. It's 900 years old. It's a very special place. We have buried here Henry VIII's first wife is buried in the cathedral, and often sort of visit her grave for quiet contemplation, which I need a lot of. And Mary Queen of Scots was buried there for a while as well. And I have a souvenir piece. I guess it's a view piece, which in this case it's in the shape of a gramophone, which has the cathedral image on it. Of course, this is one of those situations where it looks exactly the same today. And this was probably produced about 1905. So, of course, so those of you who don't know, I'm a politician in Peterborough. And what that means is anything that I share about anything I'm personally interested in, everybody's listening. So I try and keep my Shelley involvement to myself if I can. So I've got something for myself that's private. But anyway, that's really not working out. So I'm very friendly with the people at the cathedral, and I support them. I support them financially as well in lots of ways. So we're hoping later in the year to have a meeting of the Shelley Group in the UK at the cathedral, and they're very excited about it. And when I told them, oh well, I've got pieces of this china that you've never heard of till now with the cathedral on it, their minds were blown about it. And also, of course, underneath it says where it was manufactured, and it's at 80 Culham, which is Broad Bridge Street, Peterborough. And that set everybody off with the excitement, because that street doesn't exist anymore. It's now all called Bridge Street. So everyone's very excited. Oh, what's all that? So I feel very, it's just very nice. I've got a lot of Shelley, but to have something, it's my own city. And actually, for a little boast, I've just secured money and arrangements to put accessible toilets for disabled people into the cathedral. So to actually make a change to the cathedral that's 900 years old makes me extremely proud, as you can imagine. And to hold a Shelley Group meeting there, which hopefully we'll do maybe September time, makes me very proud as well. So it's so this little piece means a lot to me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Brian Hill.
Ryan, unmute yourself, please.
Sorry about that. This is a dainty coffee pot stand. It's the round one as opposed to the teapot stand, which is usually oval. You see a lot less of these than the teapot stands. This I got because I was looking for a dainty white one and I couldn't get one, but I rather like this. It says Her Majesty's Dockyard, Ireland, the country, island, Bermuda.
Oh,
So, and it's got the Shelley China back stamp. It's made for Gaddett and Young, Hamilton in Bermuda. And it's a lovely little piece, really. It's not in bad condition. Most of the gilding is intact around it, and I can't think why, really. I wanted to stand a coffee pot on top of this and obliterate the lovely design, but there we are.
Yeah, I have to.
And I've got one other piece here. This isn't a pictorial one, as you say, Marcus. A lot of the UK stuff was crests.
Yes.
This is a top hat for Bradford, which is not a million miles away from where I live in the north. This must have been made, well, it's got a Wyman back stamp when Bradford was in its heyday in the textile industry. I suspect now, if they were to make something for Bradford, it'd be more like a China woolly hat, but that wouldn't really look quite the same as this magnificent top hat. But quite a large piece for a miniature.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's awesome. Thank you. Anybody else?
A lot of the picture pieces I have are Yorkshire and Scotland. And the obvious ones are things like Sir Walter Scott and exhibitions and things. But one of my favourites is one of the Robert Burns ones, which usually it's of the cottage where he was, but this is of the monument to Ayr for Robert Burns. And I think it's quite a nice one with the river in and things. But the Yorkshire ones, I have quite a lot of them, but one of my favourites, which will mean a lot to Linda and John, this is the Ripon horn blower, who still blows every night. And we had a Shelley gathering up in Beedale where he blows the horn still every night. So it's quite fun, and it has the shop in Beedale, which you were talking about. The nearly all these pieces have the shop, and Ruth Friedman's been doing a series. She did lots of different ones for the magazines about the shops, and quite a lot of the shops are still in existence. Not necessarily as shops anymore, sadly, but she's shown us some of the buildings, and it's been really interesting to see what survived and what hasn't survived of the buildings where all these little souvenirs were sold in virtually every small town in Britain. So there are some really quite interesting ones about with pictures on. So I quite often pick up ones, and I haven't brought it, it's in the kitchen, but I bought a very nice crested piece for Nova Scotia, and I brought it back from Australia. So it's had a very good tour around the world, that one. So I'm sure there are lots of more pieces out there for us all to find. So thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, I've actually, my son bought me view pieces from Scotland. So I've got several Scottish view Shelley China pieces from my son.
I'll show one piece if I can reach it. Piece was given to me by, a lot of you will remember, Avis and Brian Goodlad, and it's of the Forth Bridge, and it not only gives the bridge, but it gives in glorious detail on the back how many rivets, how much was used to build it and everything. It has virtually every detail you could possibly want to know about the bridge. But it's one of those shapes, isn't it, where you see it on a stall and you think, whoa, there's a piece of Shelley. So it's an interesting piece that I have a lot of memories of them, which was rather nice because they loved going to Scotland. So that's another piece of picture one. So, yeah, Jeffrey's got one the same shape. It's a very Shelley shape. I bet lots of people have a picture of this.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anybody else? Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. It's like having friends come over to visit whenever we have these meetings.